Hi, welcome to Simple SQL. Today we're going to look at a variety of chart types in Power BI Desktop. To get started, we're going to grab some data from our Learning Database in our Getting Started series. So we're just going to say Database, SQL Server Database, Connect. And then in our Getting Started series, we made that on our local machine. So we'll just type localhost. And the name of mine was Simple SQL. You're going to say OK. And the table that I want to use for looking at different chart types is the raw data that we have here. That's just our sales data. So it's got a bunch of different columns in there that we can probably use to group by different things, and a good set of items in here. So I'm going to click the little checkbox, click on load, and then that should appear in my fields over here. There we go. And now I've got a good set of data in here that I can start looking at. So this is telling me to go ahead and drag fields from the fields pane onto the report canvas. The other thing you can do is click on a chart type if you already know what you want. Okay, the first one we're going to look at is the stacked bar chart. I'm going to drag this over here to make it a little bit easier. And let's get our item name as our axis and our item total as our values. And you'll see it defaulted to the count of the item total. If you remember, when we brought this data into our database, all of these are being treated as string fields. So it may not know, it doesn't know that it can add these together. We don't have a sum choice here. So let's click on our item total and then come up to the data type in the upper left hand corner. And we can see that right now it's being treated as text data. So if we recall, all of our sales in this case were in whole numbers. They might be in decimal numbers and other things. So let's go ahead and use that for now. Let's say decimal numbers, and yes, we want to continue. Okay, and so now that we're treating this as numeric values, we can come down here and now we can sum it together. And this is a better look at what we want, right? So drag this out, and now we can see the total of our sales instead of the total number of sales that we had, right? So what is a stacked bar chart? Why are we not stacking anything here? Well, we're not stacking anything here because we don't have a legend. So something we might want to use for a legend, let's say if we wanted to see our sales by country, we can take our ship country in here, and now you can see it broken out that way, right? So we use the stacked bar chart when we want to see two different categories compounded together, right? So we've got our item name compounded with the country, but then it still adds up, so we get a good view of the item and a good view of the separate piece of information within there. So we've got both this horizontal bar chart and a vertical bar chart that we can choose from. And when to pick one over the other is partially a matter of your layout, but it also depends a lot on your data. So I would use a horizontal bar chart when my items aren't sequential or don't follow after one another, and I would use the column chart or vertical bar chart when they do have a natural progression of some kind. So if I was looking at a thing that happened, in 08, 09, 10, then I might use this layout instead. Because my items don't have any real relationship with one another, I would use this layout for it. But if I was, say, showing my sales data year over year or month after month, then I might use this layout instead. Now, in addition to using these stacked chart types, there's also clustered chart types. When we look at the clustered chart type, what you can see is the main difference here is that instead of these all kind of stacking up with each other to give us a full value for each of our categories, instead they're laid next to each other. The reason I might use this clustered type instead of a stacked type is if the total sum of the items doesn't really matter as much, and I want to see the categories compared to one another. So if I cared more about seeing my sales in Canada on these different items than I did about seeing my overall sales on the items, I might use this clustered type instead of using a stacked type. The next type that we have in here are the 100% stacked bar charts. If we look at these 100% stacked bar charts, What this is showing us, instead of a total sales for each item, is what portion of those sales came from each different country. And this would be important if the total value wasn't really what you were looking at, but you wanted to see how common it was for something to come from a different category. So if I cared about the portion of sales that came from Canada, this variant of other items here, this has mostly Canadian sales, and I don't really see that when I look at my other chart types, right? If I go back to my stacked chart type, I mean, yeah, it sticks out, but not nearly as much. It's really dwarfed by my United States sales. When I put it into a 100% stacked bar chart, it becomes much more apparent that this item has good sales in Canada relative to other areas. The next chart type we want to look at is the line chart. I almost exclusively use the line chart to show date data. So if a thing occurs over a period of time, that's when I would use line data. So let's get rid of our data points on here, and let's take our date shipped and tell it that this is date data. And now let's use that as our axis. And it defaulted to using it in a date hierarchy. Let's just use date shipped. And then for our values, let's say item total in our values. And say, yep, sum. Good. And so now what we can see is how our sales performance was over the course of the month, right? So we clearly had better sales earlier in the month, and then it kind of tailed off right around October 16th. Our sales started going down from there. Next chart type to look at is the area chart. Now, typically I would only use the area chart if I had very few pieces of information being shown. So in this case where I'm only showing my item total, the area chart can work because this area underneath the line does represent a total number of sales, and it's not really cluttered by having a lot of different items on here. So let's say that maybe I was looking at my item total as well as, I think we've got a quantity here. Yep, let's go ahead and grab let's make our quantity a whole number. And then if I drag my quantity onto here as well, you can see it's a little bit more difficult to read, right? In this case, my quantity is much lower, so it's not really a problem here, but it's not really providing me any benefit over just having two lines either, right? This is just as clear, if not more clear, that these two are separate and distinct things, right? Now, if I did want to show things that kind of came together, I might use a stacked area chart, and this is going to be kind of like my stacked bar chart, right? So let me get rid of my quantity here, and instead bring in a legend value. So let's bring our shipment country back. Oh, that's a little bit gross, right? Because we had sales to Canada. We only had a couple dates with sales to Canada, and we've got a single date with sales to Germany, and the rest of this is the United States. And this doesn't look any better as a line chart. Again, it's still a problem just because we have a reduced set of data, but this would be a case in which I might use a stacked area chart. So if we look at our line and stacked column chart, you can see that it gives us the ability to show more information than we could on just the line chart or the bar chart by themselves. So already what it has done is it's moved our existing selections in, so we're still on date shipped as our axis, and then our item total sorted by country here as our bars. And that looks pretty good. And if we wanted to just bring our quantity back in here as a line value, we can now see that on each day we can see how many items we sold, and then the total of the sales for those items broken down by country. And so this gives us a good way to present lots of different pieces of information all blended together into a single chart. And just like when we're using the stacked or clustered chart without the line, the one that we choose really depends on if we care about these values added together or if we care about comparing these values individually to one another. Now, I'm going to skip over a few of these different chart types that are a little bit more specialty in their use, and just come down to the pie chart next to look at. So we looked at a donut chart in our last video, and I consider the donut chart and the pie chart to be essentially the same, with just visual differences between them, so whichever one you prefer the look of. Now with pie and donut charts, the number of categories that you have really makes a big difference, and you want to limit this number. As you can see here, trying to break up a pie chart by date, not really going to work very well for us. We've got so many little slices in here that it's hard to see which category is which. Now, if we were instead to grab our country and make that our legend, it makes it a lot smoother and a lot easier to see what's going on here. We can tell that the United States is where we primarily sell to, and that we also sell to Canada and then a little bit to Germany as well. And if we look at how that looks as a pie chart or how that looks as a donut chart, it's essentially the same, just the donut chart has the center there carved out of it. Now, those are the only chart types that I really want to talk about right now. All of the other chart types are a little bit more complicated and have pretty specialized uses. In the next episode, we're going to dig a little bit more into the formatting of these different chart types and look at associating multiple sets of data together inside Power BI Desktop. So thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you later.